The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Tonight on Health Connections, we're taking a look at what our kids eat when they're at school. Stay tuned and join in on the conversation on Health Connections. Thanks for joining us tonight on Health Connections. We're discussing the food, the lunchroom, and our kids. We're talking about school lunches, and I want to remind you at home that you can call in with your questions and comments about school lunches. What were your experiences with school lunch, or what are your children's experiences? How has it changed for your children? Let us know. The number will be at the bottom of the screen, and our operators are standing by. Tonight, our guest is Ruth Neal from Minnesota Extension here in Austin. Ruth, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, yeah.
So let's start talking tonight about what you do. You work a lot in the community, so why don't you describe what you do here in Mower County?
Okay, well, I work with all age groups in the county from preschool through school age, teenagers, adults, families, and senior citizens. So last Saturday I was at the Senior Health and Wellness Fair at the Senior Center, and I had samples of banana shakes. I made 4 batches and gave it all away to seniors and people at the health fair, and talked about how that's a great calcium-rich beverage and bananas are in season all year, and had some great conversations about other things that are in season now. Then tomorrow I'll be at the Kids Corner Child Care, which is over at Banfield School. It's obviously there's no school tomorrow, so there's some child care. So for about 65 school kids, I'll be able to be there and do some nutrition education on their off day. So we're actually going to sample some local tomatoes from Farmer John's, some apples from the Lansing Orchard, and then we're going to make some taco pizza. But they're going to get a chance to sample those local foods and just, have fun with food.
So you really cover the spectrum. I mean, you're talking about school-age kids all the way to the elderly, and so you have a wide variety of nutritional experience and providing that healthy experience for lots of people.
Right.
Obviously, tonight we're talking about school lunches and healthy nutrition for kids of the school-going age. How have school lunches really changed throughout the years? I mean, even in the last maybe 10 years since, I was in middle school or high school, I think it's changed a lot since then, and even in the last decade has become more healthy. But from your experience, or from your work or personal experience, how do you see school lunches having changed?
Well, a lot is what I saw myself when I was in school, and you started to see that a la carte option, and at first it wasn't healthy choices. It was more desserts and nachos and cookies, and they were expensive. You hear of kids that use up their whole school lunch account on that a la carte and get in trouble, or they go to the vending machines. And so if those options are available during lunch, that's obviously less nutritious. But I think there's been sort of a backlash against that, and I mean, maybe it's starting to come around. But definitely the most nutritious option remains the actual school lunch menu, what comes on the tray, peas and carrots and the slice of pizza or mashed potatoes and gravy, because it has to be nutritionally balanced. But those a la carte options, the cheeseburgers or whatever that's available.
What do you think caused some of that backlash?
I think it just really opened up to criticism when people saw how expensive and unhealthy those foods are. And obviously if you offer the kids the choice between the nutritionally balanced lunch and then the cookies and other sweet and junk foods, they're going to choose that. So
is it important that we offer those options, though? I mean, if some of the options were healthier to some extent, and even now, I think a lot of schools are offering some healthier options or even vegetarian options now, in maybe larger school districts where they might have the budget to do so. But are healthier options, if those were included in the a la carte, would that be a good thing, or?
I think so. I was kind of thinking about that as I was answering the question, and it's a matter of what habits the children come to school with,
right,
maybe, or what their experiences have been. And if you've never tried a mango, maybe you don't realize that it's delicious. Maybe the only apple you've ever tried is a red delicious apple. And so that's part of what I'm excited about doing tomorrow is we'll try some Honeycrisp apples and some Cortland Reds and say, these are really delicious, and make those healthy foods appealing. Make it be something where they could offer a Honeycrisp apple at a premium price in the a la carte line, and kids would say, yes, I want that, not a bag of chips.
Sure.
But I know that I want the Honeycrisp apple. So that's the kind of thing that you can do with healthy food, but I think it needs to be intentional, and our culture as a whole is getting there. I don't know if we're there yet.
Yeah, well, no, that's a really good point, and I was just going to ask you about that, is that kids are really smart, and I don't think sometimes we give them enough credit, and they really sometimes will just eat what's in front of them. Some people hear of the lost hour, kind of when they come home from school and the parents aren't home yet, and they kind of raid the cupboards, and the parents aren't home and they can't see what they're eating, and so a lot of the unhealthy eating happens then. Is it almost similar to that in the school, that they will eat what's in front of them? So if we presented them with more healthy options and say no bad options or bad, would that increase the nutrition that these kids are getting?
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts spring to mind. I mean, there's that constant advice that you need to offer a food multiple times to get a picky eater to
well, you
try
have to create the habit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can't say from experience, I haven't raised any picky eaters that don't have children yet, but I've heard that advice. I've heard that that's true. And then something else that springs to mind is that nationwide there are organizations that do surveys of what children eat. And they've found in recent years children eat less chicken nuggets and pizza and cheeseburgers and more things like sliced apples and maybe macaroni and cheese. I'm trying to think of a couple other of those items, maybe yogurt, things that are on fast food menus now but are healthier options. The more that those are being offered, the more they're showing up in what kids are eating.
Yeah.
So you see that slow change, and it is a matter of if it's offered, they will eat it. I think you're right there.
And I know that I've seen in some of the younger people that, whether it's family or, relatives or things like that, that I have seen them, even if it's the bagged apple that's already sliced and it's prepared slices and things like that, and it's, it's almost like the baby carrots that you can get. You don't have to peel the carrot and cut off the ends and prepare that. It's already in those bite-sized pieces, so it's nicer for some of those younger kids and more accessible, I guess. One of the things that's always been talked about, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time with school lunches, is that for some kids it might be the best meal of the day, or you were saying it might be the only meal of the day for some kids.
Right.
How important is it for kids to have a nutritional meal at lunch, a balanced meal?
I mean, as I was saying, the nutritious meal that is on the school calendar, that comes in that tray, is required by the federal government to have 1/3 of the day's protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, iron in that meal. I mean, and so they're able to get 1/3 of their day's nutrition in that school meal so that the school can be then reimbursed through the federal school lunch program. And that's just a requirement that everyone's used to. But just think about that. If you're from a family where maybe you're going through financial hardships right now and there's not as much food at home, or maybe where there's not the time or the skills to prepare a healthy meal, being able to get that nutrition once a day think how key that would be. And people have found that so important that they've implemented the summer food service program. I mean, that is in its 3rd year here in Austin this last summer. And that's been a success where anyone of school age can come to Ellis during the summer and get a lunch. And then there's also enrichment activities offered by myself through the University of Minnesota Extension and through the library and Girl Scouts and other great organizations, all partnering to provide education and nutrition throughout the summer. So obviously we found it so key to offer that nutritious option, especially during tough economic times.
What role does a family's income play into how a child eats?
Well, certainly in urban areas you hear of things called food deserts.
Okay.
And that's where there's a neighborhood where there's no grocery store within walking distance.
Right.
So maybe people are getting their groceries at the corner store, and there's just, milk and orange juice and apples and onions are their most healthy options, and junk food. So that's a food desert. And even here in Austin, for families of lower income, if they're not taking advantage of emergency food resources like maybe the food shelf or food stamps if they qualify, there could just be a lack of food in the house. I mean, that could be the reality.
Yeah. We had on this program before, we had a med student from the University of Wisconsin, and she was talking, she didn't call it that, but she talked about that food desert idea over in Madison, and really talking about how even she had this after-school program where they had some underprivileged kids, and they were teaching them some education about healthy eating and nutrition and things like that. And they provided them with some of those healthy snacks that we were talking about earlier, with apples and carrots and things like that. But the problem was, when they went home, they ran into that exact same thing, that in this neighborhood in Madison, the grocery store went out of business. And so the only options that they had were fast food or the corner convenience store. And so, and that's an example that's a little bit further away from here, but, it's only a few-hour drive from Minnesota to Madison, and to think that even that close, that there's an example of something that you're talking about. So, for people at home to think that, it can't happen here, I think, that there are examples in this area that, people do go without food, or not the healthy food.
And let me just throw in there, too, need to be aware that not everyone has a car.
Sure.
And some people maybe live in an apartment that's not within walking distance of a grocery store, so it could apply to them right here in Austin. And we do have the Austin-Mower County Transit, the AMCAT, which it provides one option, but if you fill up your grocery cart, you don't necessarily want to take that home on the AMCAT. It limits how much you can buy at once. So, to certain individuals right here in Austin that maybe I've worked with, I see that could apply even here. So that's where some of those programs come into play that allow people to purchase food, and maybe then they have more money left in their budget for that transportation. But for families that make $41,000 or less and have a family of 4, they're eligible for those reduced price lunches. And if you have an income in that range, you might also be eligible for SNAP, which is the new name of food stamps. And you might be eligible for WIC and some other food resources that can help you out.
And especially with WIC, too, there's a lot more options with the Women, Infants, and Children's program at area grocery stores, that there's more healthier options, that they changed the program.
Exactly. That's been in the news a lot lately, that they've revamped that program finally.
And even aside from income, and that plays a large part in how people eat. But what role do home meals play in this, even aside from budget or things like that? Sitting down as a family, how does what we do at home, how does that affect what kids do at school?
Well, certainly if you're not used to eating those healthy foods at home, you're going to be less likely to try them at school unless it's kind of introduced in a way that makes you willing to try it. I know that one thing that they're doing to introduce foods into the school where they might not have been introduced at home is having kind of an intentional farm-to-school program, where they have the farmer come in and they have a taste testing of several different kinds of foods. So that way you introduce those unfamiliar vegetables.
Sure.
But they've even shown, I mean, to introduce those things at home is such a benefit to kids. I mean, if kohlrabi is in your vocabulary, I mean, there you're ahead in literacy skills, not only nutritionally, because you just ate a nutritious kohlrabi, and you were willing to try it, and that makes you more likely to try other things that maybe look weird or sound different. So
yeah, and we're not even
around.
talking about lima beans or something like that, where people are generally like, "Oh no," but I mean, these are things that are very common in other cultures or even other parts of the country,
right?
And we're not exposed to that here. So some of those programs and is a lot of that. Is that organic farming most of the time, or is it sometimes conventional farming, or is it really just kind of local farmers that are included in this program?
From what I've heard of Farm to School, the emphasis is local.
Okay.
So connecting with a farmer that produces and sells their food locally and not through a larger supply chain.
Sure.
So you're getting it with a short transportation distance.
Okay.
That's one of the emphasis, and trying to find a way to do that in a way that's affordable to the school within their constraint. Because one thing we haven't mentioned is that all that nutrition is provided in the school lunch for like under $3 a meal.
Right.
So keeping it within that affordability of a school lunch, but still providing something that's more nutritious and becomes, like we were saying, an educational experience for the kids, learning about nutrition, learning about agriculture and farming and the local economy, and learning about culinary skills, how to prepare different foods. It all wraps into that sort of nutrition education program. And I think you'll see a lot of emphasis on that in the future. A survey done by the Minnesota School Nutrition Association showed that 60% of schools in Minnesota want to start buying local food. 25% are, to some degree. Maybe that's just apples.
Sure.
And maybe it's just wild rice, depending on what part of the state you're in. But 60% are interested in it. And I think that shows that there's a lot of attention in finding ways to get that local, more nutritious food into schools affordably.
Right.
Yeah.
You brought up the point of budgets. And even before any type of economic crisis, budgets for school lunches have usually always been tight, and that's always been kind of the one main constraint on school districts changing how they deliver meals. What role does the budget play in offering these healthier options? You mentioned that you have to offer the healthier option for the same price or a very similar price as the current meal, and we're talking less than $3 a meal. So what role does the budget play?
I think it's going to be key. I think anybody who says that it's worth paying more to have that nutrition and education and support your local farmers, I mean, they certainly are well-meaning, but it's going to be key to keep it within the budget. I don't think it's going to happen if you have to pay too much more.
Right.
So that budget has just been key for the last 50-some years that the school lunch program has been in place, and it's been very successful at offering a nutritious meal to families at a low price. I mean, that's part of the fact that the federal government is subsidizing even people that pay the full price and not free or reduced price lunch. They're still receiving somewhat of a subsidy in cash from the federal government, giving the school commodity foods that it purchases.
Sure.
So,
is it hard to promote the healthy eating with all these options that you have at the school? Does sometimes the a la carte options or even just the plethora of options that are there, how does that affect promoting the healthy eating? I mean, the farm to school program is one way to promote healthy eating, but is it hard to do that?
Well, there's definitely challenges. It's a matter of getting people to taste good food and getting them excited about good food. I think it's once you've tasted that Honeycrisp apple, you are going to say, wow, this is better than a bag of chips. And maybe not. Maybe it takes a couple times, and maybe that's just not you. But, I mean, if you say you don't like apples, I don't believe you. Just taste 3 apples and tell me which one you like more and which one you like less. Everyone likes certain kinds of apples. So I just think people really do like healthy food, and if you give them good, healthy food, they will like it.
I know some people have said recently, if you read stuff about changing your lifestyle and changing from eating the salty, fatty foods, and you're changing to the healthier options, once you really kind of get in that habit, the old food that you thought tasted good really doesn't taste good to you anymore.
Yeah.
Does that play earlier we were talking about, the kids eating the apples and the yogurt and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that they find some of those things just literally better tasting than some of those less healthy options? Or maybe they just don't have the experience of eating those less healthy options. So
well, it's hard to tell. I mean, I
Sure.
should survey some young kids. I'll see them tomorrow about their opinions of what they think tastes better. But they're generally willing to try something, especially if they've seen their parents try it. If they got to help prepare it, if it's presented in a fun way, if it's not introduced with too many other new foods at one time.
Right.
There's all sorts of factors that play into whether kids are willing to try something new and healthy and make it a habit. And it might be easier to make that habit at a young age than it is for you or I at an older age to pick up new healthy habits because we're more ingrained in our old ones. But, I mean, we all enjoy something sweet or salty or fat-laden from time to time. We need a treat, but we generally want a healthy, balanced diet, and our body craves that nutrition.
Right. Is the school a valid place to educate students about is the lunchroom, I guess, more specifically, is the lunchroom a valid place for us to be kind of educating, some people might say dictating, what people eat? Obviously, the federal government for the last 60 years has said that we cannot let our children go without healthy, well-balanced meals, and so that's why they're putting literally the money where their mouth is, and putting their money behind nutritious meals, putting the money behind the redesigned food pyramids and things like that. Yeah. How important is it that this is not just a school discussion? How important is it that it becomes what a family does or what a community does? Is there a difference between what we're doing in the lunchroom and what we're doing in the community? Because what you do is not just schools.
Right.
You're out in the community.
Right, with individual families sometimes.
Right.
So I think I get your point that if we start this in the lunchroom, will it carry over to all of life? But, I mean, I think when we saw that in the lunchroom we could at least address part of the day.
Sure.
And I think that point is still valid. I mean, these school lunches came when people were in one-room schoolhouses and saw that the kids didn't have anything to eat. Or in the 60s there was poverty still in America, and they saw we need to create and reform the school lunch and the food stamp program because there's still poverty and we don't want these kids going hungry. So it's at least impacting one part of their day and providing nutrition for part of their day. And then at best, it is changing the way they make decisions the rest of the day. So maybe we can't change all of society through school lunch. Maybe we need to look at our broader systems and broader policies. But as we're looking at that broader part, you can't forget about school lunch either at this point. So I don't know, I'm kind of providing both sides of the coin. Like, it does what it does, and other things, it can't stand alone, but you can't live without it either. Yeah,
definitely. Contentious thing to end the show with.
Okay.
One of the things that people have really tried to address in the last decade or so, and I remember when I was going through school, were soft drinks in schools. Pop, the Pepsi, the Coke, all those soft drinks. A lot of student groups, maybe your student council or student senate or something like that, saw having a vending machine as a way to raise money and funds for your student organization. A lot of that, we started the show with a backlash of some other things. There's kind of been a backlash against some of those things and saying we're not going to offer those soft drinks or the pop anymore in our schools. Is that important that we're offering not just water but some other healthier options? What, for someone at home, what might be some of those other healthier options that they can have to drink besides pop?
besides pop, people should be drinking and water. Milk, which offers not just calcium. People often just think milk, calcium, which is right, but 7 other important vitamins and minerals and protein
Right.
that all work together in your body, as well as 100% fruit juice,
Okay.
which obviously has vitamin A and vitamin C, and I mean both of those options are better than soda for your body because they have some nutrition in the liquid.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean I drink almost no pop. I enjoy it every once in a while.
Right.
I just really have lost my taste for drinking very much pop. And I hate to take away that funding source for schools where they've found that it's lucrative to have the vending machine.
Right.
And it's convenient and you have to offer the option. But, I mean, they feel that they do have to offer that. But you have to look at some point if kids are drinking a lot of soft drinks and those liquid, empty calories, it's a serious problem.
Yeah, maybe the school becomes a safe haven almost from pop or something like that. What would be the one thing that if a family or if a student was watching, what would be the one thing that you would want them to take away? Is it to try, something new? Don't give up trying something new. What would that be? That piece of advice be?
Wow, when we're talking about school lunches and healthy eating for kids, I mean, I really like what you were starting to say there. Don't give up trying new things. Always be willing to try it, and to learn more about it. Kind of go from realize that it's a process. Saying, I'm going to avoid this food, to saying, I'm willing to try it, to saying, I like it, I might try it again, to I love it, I can't get enough,
Right.
Teach me how to prepare it in different ways, teach me where I can buy it locally and freshest tasting,
Yeah.
and just going crazy because now you love squash or whatever it is,
Yeah.
where at one point you were like, what is squash? I don't even know what it looks like. So realize that it's a progression. Don't expect it to come all at once. It's small steps, but yeah, keep trying.
Well, I think that's great advice to leave our viewers with, so
Okay.
thank you, Ruth, tonight for coming in.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us tonight on Health Connections. Be sure to join us again next week here on KSMQ. Thanks, and good night.